Hello and welcome to the UnX Network special presentation. Today we have a very special guest speaker. Sev Tok is a speaker, author, transformational coach, ufologist, and experiencer advocate. Originally from Istanbul, Turkey, she immigrated to the U.S. as a little girl, not knowing English as she started first grade, and earned a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Loyola University. Sev moved to the Inner Banks of North Carolina in 2017 and had a life-altering experience the second night she arrived. She came face to face with Greys who burned 2 red X marks into her back. Sev's ex-ET contact started at age 10, but she kept it hidden until she moved to the Inner Banks. She came out in 2018 as a speaker at AlienCon, and through her book, You Have the Right to Talk to Aliens, endorsed by renowned UFO researcher Kathleen Marden. She is currently working on her next book. Sev is featured in multiple TV and radio programs. She was Master of Ceremonies at MUFON's International Symposium in 2022, and she serves as Assistant State Director for North Carolina and as a field investigator. She's also on the executive committee of the Experiencer Resource Team. North Carolina is usually in the top 10 most UFO sightings in the country. As an experiencer advocate, Sev helps experiencers around the world. She also offers personal and private guidance to experiencers through Tell Me Your ET Story on her website, planetsev.com, her monthly newsletter, and her YouTube channel, Alien Spirit. Welcome, Sev.
Hello, Margie. Hello, everybody. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I am so glad that you could join us today as our speaker. So take it away, Sev.
Okay. Hello, and my name is Sev Tok. Thank you, Margie, for this opportunity to connect with all of you. I will talk about my lifelong ET contact, describing just a few of my experiences and the information given by the ETs. This cosmic information transformed my fear of the ETs into gratitude and appreciation, which resulted in dramatic changes in my life. I created all the slides in this presentation to portray as best as possible what I experienced and what I saw. So this is my story of how the aliens changed my life for the better.
Do the arrow keys, Sev.
Yes, okay. I'll start at the entry point, June 30th, 1963 in Istanbul, Turkey. Istanbul is Turkey's largest city and the capital is Ankara. Istanbul is called a transcontinental city because it's divided in half by the Bosphorus. There's a European side and an Asian side, and I am from the European side. I decided to show my face. Istanbul was once Constantinople, which was a Christian city, and it was the crossroads of the world and is very rich in history and archaeological ruins. And some of you may remember the really hit song from the 80s, or was it the 70s? Istanbul was Constantinople. Yeah, why do I hit the arrow keys sometimes and they don't work? I'm hitting the arrow keys.
You are. Okay.
Yeah.
Try your mouse key, your mouse.
Oh, there it goes again. Try I don't have a mouse. Why does it get stuck? Oh, okay. The Ottoman Empire was a Turkish empire, and it was one of the strongest and longest lasting empires in the world. It ruled North Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe for more than 600 years. And the Ottoman Empire was ruled by sultans. The first sultan in 1299 was Sultan Gazi, and our last sultan in 1922 was Sultan Mehmet VI, and there were 36 sultans. The sultans lived in Topkapı Palace, which is a museum today, and I've been there several times. It's gorgeous. And my most favorite part is the harem section, because the tiles there are just exquisite. The reason the last sultan reigned until 1922 is because Turkey then became a republic, and our first president was Mustafa Kemal, who is right there. And he modernized and democratized Turkey, and he is very loved and very respected and admired. He was given the name Ataturk, which means father of the Turks, and he has almost godlike status. He is loved so much. Turkey has many historical sites from a variety of timelines, and some of you might know about Göbekli Tepe, which they think is at least 12,000 years old. This is my mother, Sevim Herish. Her father was Talat Herish, who's right here, and he was a lieutenant colonel in the Turkish army. And here's my mom and my dad and my mom's sister Sevinç, and she currently lives in Istanbul. Her father, the Lieutenant Colonel Herish, worked very closely with Ataturk, not only in a military capacity, but personally, they knew each other and they were friends. And wherever my family, or excuse me, wherever my mom and her family went, they were kind of treated like celebrities because her father was well known and very respected. This is my father, Ergun Tok. His father right here, Bachelor Tok, was a very successful businessman. He was the only one in all of Turkey to sell General Motors auto parts, and he was very respected and well loved too. And my dad had a luxurious life. He was a socialite. One of his best friends was the nephew of the Turkish president. And my grandfather's driver's license number was number 2, because number 1 belonged to the Sultan's chauffeur. There is a military theme that runs through the lives of most experiencers, and I certainly have that. I've also lived around some of the most important military bases and installations in the United States, if not the world, and I do have military in my family. Here we have my mom's father, who's a lieutenant colonel who worked with Ataturk, and here we have my grandmother and her dad, who was a high-ranking official in the Ottoman army. And here is my dad. In Turkey, the men have to do military service, and you can buy yourself out of it, but he didn't want to. He wanted to experience it. So I laugh at this picture because if you look at this man right now, he's about to stab this guy because he said something to his girlfriend. And my dad told me that the moment this picture was taken, everybody descended upon this guy to save him from stabbing that guy. And it just makes me laugh because it just makes me think of just these old school Turkish men. I have many conscious memories of military abductions or MILABs, and they include humans, ETs, and hybrids. Some of the experiences are neutral and some of them are very upsetting. And I'm just now starting to talk about my MILAB experiences, and I will be sharing more about them in a few minutes. So here I am, I just arrived to Earth. And about a year later, my mom, my dad, and I went on the adventure of a lifetime. We emigrated to Montreal, Canada. My father's entire education was in private schools speaking French. So they thought if they went to Quebec, they could understand the language, but as soon as they landed, they realized the French in Quebec is different than the other French, and they didn't know English. And here they are carrying me, a tiny baby. It wasn't easy for them, and I really admire them. They're very courageous and they're very brave. The reason we came was because the most important thing for my dad was to have freedom of thought and freedom of speech. And he wanted to make sure that I was raised in that environment. So he figured America was the best place to be. In Montreal, my sister was born, and even though I was only 2 or 3, I do have memories, and they all include snow, snow, and more snow. And then after a couple of years, we moved to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area where I did most of my growing up. We lived in Quantico, Virginia, right by the Quantico Marine Base. And I started first grade not knowing English, and I taught my parents English. And here I am, right there. And during this whole time, I'm having ET contact, and I'm also having supernatural experiences. Growing up, I just tried to be as normal as possible. I learned that I couldn't talk about these kind of things with my friends. So I had a very happy childhood, but I had a lot of secrets, and I felt like I was living a dual life. I felt like I was living as an earthling, and I was also having a life with otherworldly beings. During our school years, my parents were very open-minded, and they taught us how to meditate. I started meditating in 5th grade, and my dad played psychic games with us. We would have to guess shapes and numbers, and my dad, my sister, and I would bend spoons a la Uri Geller. And when I was in high school, my dad bought a Ouija board home, which was the beginning of my channeling. And I'm not fond of Ouija boards, and I prefer not to have one in my home. My dad was a genius, and he wrote his own theory of astrophysics and gravity. And before he passed away 5 years ago, I helped him put it online. It's called The Real Universe by Ergun Tok. So I grew up in a family that was very open and very accepting. It was in the 5th grade when we moved to Crofton, Maryland, which is very close to Annapolis, Maryland, that I began to have my first conscious memories of ET contact. It started in 5th grade from the age of 10 to 12. And at night, I would be outside waiting for a ship to come. And this happened so many times I lost count. And each time the ship would come from a different direction. And I would be so happy when I saw it, so happy. And it would come, it would land, and stairs would descend, and this being would come out. And the ship was so big that each time it came, it would hover over me, and I couldn't even see the night sky. So this is very close to what he looked like. He looked more human than not. He was in a dark clothes, dark hair. The only difference I could see were that his ears were just slightly elongated, and that was it. And he felt like a brother to me, and I loved him very much. And he was just checking up on me. He would make sure I was okay, just asking me how things were going. The very last time when I was 12 that I saw him was different, because this time I was with a group of kids, and I had never been with a group of kids before. And they were standing beside me, and we were watching the spaceship go away, and we knew that this was the last time we were going to see him, and we were all really, really sad. I didn't see the face of the kids, but because we were all about the same height, I assumed that we were all about the same age. And after each visit, I would just find myself back in my bedroom. Ding, my eyes would just pop open. I'd be completely fully alert. And I'd be a little confused because my bedroom didn't feel as real as my space brother did. But I would tell myself, you just forget it. It's time to get dressed and go to 5th grade. And I said nothing I said nothing to my parents. I said nothing to anyone. I don't know why, because my parents were very open-minded and were believers. We did believe that there was life on other planets, but for some reason, I just kept it a secret for decades and decades and decades. While that ship was going away and we felt really sad, at the same time, I had a knowing that it was time for me to do my work. I had never heard that before. But at that age, I didn't know what my work was. But now I think I'm starting to understand what that is. So I just tried to live as normally as possible. I graduated from Loyola University in Baltimore, Maryland with a Bachelor of Science in biology. I was pre-med, but I had an internship at University of Maryland Hospital and realized that's not what I want to do. I got married twice. Each of them became abusive. I had my own successful wholesale and retail jewelry company. I designed all the jewelry and sold to boutiques around the country. And that's a picture of the store that I had in the Harbor Place in Baltimore, Maryland. I sailed a lot, I traveled a lot. From the outside, it looked like I had achieved the American dream, which is what I wanted to do for my parents, because I didn't want my parents to regret coming to America. But inside, I was not happy. I never felt fulfilled, and I always felt like I was searching for something more, but I never really knew what that was. After my second divorce, I moved to this really cool artsy area of Baltimore City, and I started to have a lot of ET contact and supernatural contact again. And one evening, I was shown a baby in a tube. And I was standing in front of this tube that felt like it was glowing, and there was nothing else in the room. It was dark. And there was this baby floating on the top of it. There was liquid in it that was like bluish, glowy, bluey. And the baby's eyes were open, and they were the bluest eyes I'd ever seen in my life. And even though its leg was hiding its sex, I knew it was a boy. And so I'm looking at this baby, and I do not understand what this baby is, why it's floating in a tube, and why I'm looking at it. And then I felt something behind me. So I turn around and I see three grays, tall, medium, and short. And this is before I realized that grays come in different sizes. And they were very nice. And they said, take your time. We're just going to stand back here. We don't want to interrupt you. Just have all the time that you need. And that didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand what that meant. I was very, very confused. And I hid this. This was a secret of mine for decades. I never told anyone. I started my spiritual counseling practice shortly before leaving my second marriage in 2010. I was doing soul purpose sessions, and I still do them. And after 5 years of being single, I met Patrick, who I'm no longer with, and I moved to Capitol Hill, Washington, DC to be with him because he managed the testing of a new military defense system on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. He was a civilian who worked for the Navy, and we lived by the Navy Yard in Washington, DC. So for 1 year, I went between Kauai, Hawaii, and our townhouse on Capitol Hill. And it was in 2016 when I was in Hawaii that my father passed away. One time when I was back on Capitol Hill, Patrick called, and he said he had to go to the White Sands Missile Range for work. And he suggested that I meet him in El Paso and that he would take me to Roswell. And I was so excited because I'd wanted to go to Roswell since I was a little girl. And this was like amazing. It just like dropped out of nowhere. So I flew to El Paso and I met him, and we drove to the White Sands Missile Range, which I did not like at all. Patrick has been there many times for work, and he wanted to show it to me. And as we drove up, I could see that it was at the base of this big, black, dark mountain. And I was just having just very uncomfortable feelings. It felt like all the hair was standing up on the back of my neck. In my mind's eye, I could see hallways and rooms and passages under the ground, and I was just very, very uncomfortable. There was a rocket park right here, and everything was tall and pointy, except for this one thing right here, which caught my attention. And that was a balloon launch decelerator test that was conducted in 1972. It was a parachute system of the Viking entry vehicle to land on Mars, but it just looked very suspicious to me. So we went through the museum, and when we finally finished, I ran to the car and I said to Patrick, I never want to come here again. So off we go to the White Sands National Park, which is gorgeous and feels like another planet. And you can see, you can slide down the gypsum. The whole area used to be covered by an ocean, and when the ocean disappeared, it left behind deposits of gypsum, and it was absolutely breathtaking. And then we went on to Roswell. We went to the museum, and here I am watching an autopsy. And then we went to our hotel room in Roswell, and we were both very tired. And Patrick went to the bathroom while I was sitting on the bed, and I was switching the channels on the TV. And I was thinking to myself, I wish the show People of Earth was on, but I knew it wasn't on. It had only been on for a couple of seasons, and it was a very funny take on an alien abduction group, and it was produced by Conan O'Brien, and I really enjoyed it. So when Patrick came out of the bathroom, I stopped the TV on a commercial. And then he said what he had to say. And then I turned the TV back on. I didn't even change the channel. I just turned it on. And all of a sudden, poof, People of Earth was on. And I was a little freaked out. And we watched it because he had never seen it before. And we laughed. And then we fell asleep. And then the next thing I know, my eyes pop open. And the room was pitch black. I literally couldn't even see my hand in front of my face. And I heard something or someone walking on the carpet. And I felt Patrick get into the bed. And I thought to myself, why was Patrick sitting on the couch? Was it because of the aliens? And I fell back to sleep. When I awoke, Patrick was in the shower, and while I was sitting on the bed, I had this download, this instant rush of information and visuals. And I had a clear memory of being with a group of Greys, and they were giving me information. They were talking about a book at that time that I was writing, and they were suggesting that I write another book. But at that time, I didn't like them. I didn't like the Greys. I thought they were bad. And I was like, who are you to tell me what kind of book to write? And they were reminding me of the hybridization tube that I saw. And they were telling me about the hybridization program between the humans and the Greys, and that millions of people are in this program, and most are not even aware of it, that there are billions of embryos, and these embryos are going to be used if our race dies out. We're on the path of that happening, but it's not too late. It's not destined. We can save ourselves. We can change that. These embryos would reseed the earth. And what they're doing in this DNA slicing hybridization program is that they're joining with humans who are, generally speaking, empathetic, who love easily, and who have strong psi abilities. They said that their race died out because they lost their ability to be empathetic and sympathetic. And if a race is not empathetic, it's going to die out. And so those are just some of the attributes that they're looking for. And so these embryos are created to be very, very loving. There was a time that there was a worry what would happen if some entities got a hold of these billions of embryos, entities that weren't very positive or loving, and what would they do? Would they turn these embryos into killing machines? And I was told these embryos are so loving that they would make horrible killing machines. So that's not really a legitimate concern. So after Patrick came out of the bathroom, I said to him, did anything weird happen last night? And he goes, oh, yes. I said, were you sitting on the couch? And he said, yes, I was. And he never sits on the couch. He never gets up in the middle of the night and sits on the couch. So I asked why, and he's very, very logical. And I could tell he was having a little bit of a difficulty. And he said, well, I've never experienced this before, but there was something in the room and it was staring at us and I could feel it. And I kept getting up to find it, but I couldn't find it. And eventually I just gave up and I had to go sit on the couch and I just watched you toss and turn and toss and turn. And I thought you were awake. So I told him what I experienced, and this really kind of messed us up. It really played with my mind. And like I said, back then I thought they were evil. So I was really upset that they were messing with me, because I was really afraid of them and I thought they were victimizing me. So 1 year later from this, we moved from Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C. to where I am now on the inner banks of North Carolina. I exchanged this as my front yard to this as my front yard. And when I came here on my second night, I made contact with the Greys. I woke up that morning and I was unpacking dishes and I felt something bite my butt. And it hurt. So I yelled over to Patrick, will you look at my butt? I think something bit it. And he's like, sure. So I walk over to the living room and I bend over and he's not saying anything. And I'm getting really nervous. And I'm like, well, did something bite it? He goes, yeah, there looks like there's a bite there, but there's also a red X. And he took a picture of it. And this is it. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches wide and has these 9 circular dots that look like they were burned into my skin. And when I ran my finger across them, I couldn't feel them. And this really freaked me out. It freaked him out too. And we had no answers for this. And in my gut, I knew it was the Greys and I thought they were messing with me. So I said to him, we're just going to forget about this. We're just going to forget like we ever saw this. He's like, all right. But then 9 days later, I came to in my bedroom very abruptly, like ding, my eyes were open, completely alert. And I had this download, this rush of memory and visuals of the night before, where I was on this hospital type bed and I felt paralyzed and I was on my side and I couldn't move my arms and I couldn't move my legs. And it was dimly lit. I only saw one other piece of furniture and I felt something behind me. So I could turn my head. And when I did, this was standing just inches from me. And we locked eyes. And in my book, I describe it's like looking into 2 pools of black oil. And it didn't say anything, nothing telepathically. And that freaked me out a lot because I was used to telepathic information from them. So when it just stared at me and didn't say anything, I was scared to death. And I turned my head back around and ding, I'm back in my bedroom. So I get out of bed and I'm very, very scared and very worried because if there's another X on me, I didn't think I was going to be able to handle it. So I went downstairs and I waited for Patrick to wake up, and he always got up before I did, but not this time. And I'm very nervous. And he came downstairs and I told him my memory and I asked him to check, and there was another X across from the first one, just like the first one, on my right cheek. The first X was on the left cheek of my buttocks and the next X was on the right cheek. And this was also accompanied with something that I had never known before in any of my other ET contacts. But when I was on that bed in that room, I knew I was on the moon. So when I saw this picture, I had the best way to describe it as an existential crisis. It's very hard to describe. because I didn't know what was real anymore. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know who we were as human beings anymore. I didn't know what the truth was anymore. I didn't know why I was talking to aliens in the middle of the night and what was going on. And I was so scared and so upset and so lost that I just started to cry. And he asked me if there was anything he could do, and I couldn't think of anything. So I just calmed myself down. And for the first time in my life, I said, I need help. Like, I cannot deal with this by myself. I need to get help, and I don't know who's going to help me. So I just organically let it happen. And then a few months later, a friend of mine, Elizabeth, who lives on Maui, told me to watch Dr. Stephen Greer's movie, Unacknowledged. So I did. And that lit this fire in my belly. And I walked to the computer and I told myself, all right, I have to find somebody to send a picture of this X to. And I heard in my head, MUFON. So I Googled MUFON and I saw it's the Mutual UFO Network, the largest UFO organization in the world. And I saw a picture of Kathleen Marden there. And I told myself, she's the one, she's going to help me. And so I sent her a picture of my ex and she responded right away. And she was so generous and so helpful. And we Skyped for an hour and a half. And she validated so much for me. It was one of the most important conversations in my life. And I told her that I had this fear of the government bothering me, of the government tapping my phones, knocking on my door. And she told me true stories of where the government did harass people and where they did tap their phones. And I also asked her, what am I supposed to do with all this information that the Greys have given me about the hybridization program and the possible fate of Earth? And she said, I can't tell you. That's something that you need to figure out. So I decided, all right, I do see myself, I told her, in my mind's eye standing on stage, but I don't know really what that means or if that's ever going to happen. I'll just let it organically happen, whatever's going to come next. And then I called my mom because she knew I was going to talk to Kathy. And 10 minutes into the call with my mom, which was on a landline, my phone died. And I was like, oh, the government knows what I'm doing. They know who I am. And they, oh my God, they're tapping my phones. And I was so scared. The phone came back on in 10 minutes and it had never, that never happened before and it never happened again. And then another unusual thing happened because that very night, the day that I talked with Kathleen Marden, that night I had a MILAB experience. And I was like in this government office-like space, which was under the ground. And this is a drawing of where I was. And I came down these stairs and it just looks like government buildings, drab, everything is drab and sterile. And there's always these young men there that look like they're in their 30s, just wearing drab clothes, short hair. And this one man came up to me and he asked me to look at that poster. And as we're looking at this poster, it was filled with mathematical equations and physics equations. And I've taken a lot of math and science in my life because I have a biology degree. And but I don't remember what the equations were. I just made them up right there on that drawing. And this man turns to me and he asks me, does the saucer reach the K point before or after it conducts its visitation? And I remember looking at him, ding, I'm in my bedroom. I can't remember anything else. I took a lot of science, like I said, but I didn't remember anything about the K point. But I did Google it, and it is a real thing. And it has to do with the different energy levels in a structure. And actually, when I was watching the Winter Olympics, the ski jumping narrators mentioned the K point. So in ski jumping, the K point is where the steepest part of the hill ends and the slope starts to flatten out. And I told Grant Cameron about this. Grant had interviewed me a couple times. I told him that about my MILAB experience and that they asked me about the K point. And he told me that an experiencer had contacted him and the ETs had given her information about the K point. This is a room that I have been in at least twice. One time it was a neutral experience, and another time it was a horrific experience. This is MILAB. Each time there's at least one man standing beside me. There's and so a couple other men somewhere else. And I'm sitting in this one room looking into another room, and there's a partition of a glass. And so one time they bought this gray in. And the guy said to me, it was tall. He said, this is the original gray. And then they took that one out and they brought in a shorter one. And he said, this is the hybrid of the original gray. And then they took that one out and they brought in the short one, the short gray. And he said, this is the hybrid of the original gray. And it was understood that with each hybrid, there was a decrease in sentience. So the smallest one, which is felt like it was more robotic and really didn't have much of a sentience at all. The other time I was in this room, they were forcing me to do something that had to do with my psi abilities, psi warfare. They wanted me to do something. I can't remember what it was, but I knew that it was very negative and that people were going to die or could die, and I refused to do it. And there was torture. And I'm not ready to talk about that right now, but that was a bad experience, and it happened in that room too. I've just recently started talking about my MILAB experiences. Besides the K point experience and the 3 types of grays, my MILAB experiences have included where I've healed hybrid babies, and there was a doctor and a nurse in the room, and at least they looked like a human doctor and a nurse. I was given tests and a handbook of a variety of different aliens. I was detained with 2 young ladies, and there was a black box that these men in black men were holding, and that was not a good experience. And then the other one where I had psychological manipulation that I described in that room, and that was a horrible experience. 3 months after talking with Kathy, I woke up one morning and I declared that I was going to write a book, and I'm going to call it You Have the Right to Talk to Aliens. And I'm very honored that Kathy wrote an endorsement for the book. And 2 weeks after it debuted on Amazon, I was asked to be a speaker at AlienCon in Baltimore, Maryland, which was wonderful. My coming out in Baltimore, Maryland was perfect because I had so much ET contact there. And my mom and my sister and my friends who still live there. AlienCon was life-changing for me because it made me realize what I want to do. I want to help experiencers. And at the conference, I lost my fear. I did what I was the most afraid of doing my whole life, was coming out. And I came out and I exposed myself. And that was not only a physical act, but a mental and a spiritual act as well. And it changed me. It helped me align with my authenticity, and it allowed me to be the real me. And then that's when the doors of my life flung open. And my life since coming out has been fun and interesting and fascinating. And all the bad things that I thought were going to happen if I came out never even happened. I was worried about things that never even happened. 3 months after AlienCon, I was sitting in my living room, and I was in a contemplative mood. And these 2 beings entered the room and sat on the couch. And I actually picked up my phone and I took a picture of them, but you can't see them there. So what I did was I created this slide to give you an idea of what they look like. They didn't look exactly like this, but the colors are similar. They were energetic beings, and they were made up of kaleidoscopes of constantly moving energy beams. So they're really hard to draw because they're always moving. And it was a variety of blues and silvers, and every now and then there was this flash of spring green, like in their throat area. And I was shocked. and they were tall, and they were the most loving beings I've ever encountered in my life. The love that they exuded was more than the love that I feel for my mother. It was unbelievable. It's very hard to describe. And they started talking to me, and I was taking notes as they were talking. And the first thing they said to me was, when you look at me, you look into your own eyes. And then they started telling me about Tesla and Tchaikovsky and Disney. They said that those three men they said that Disney and Tesla had met, and that those three men were in contact. And when you listen to Disney's Fantasia, it's filled with Tchaikovsky music. When you listen to Tchaikovsky music, it's a DNA activator. It helps you fulfill your purpose. It amps up your vibration. And Disney knew this. And that's why he put Tchaikovsky music in Fantasia. So Fantasia is not just a cartoon, but it's actually a DNA activator. And it's always been one of my very favorite cartoons. Well, if you want to call it a cartoon. Tesla, Tchaikovsky, and Disney have always been my favorites since I was a little girl. And these blue beings, I call them the blues, also gave me information about DNA activation. And I wrote down what they said. It was a couple pages worth of information, and I wrote it down exactly as they said it. I don't edit anything. And they said some very interesting things. Need to move this, okay. They said your knowledge of what an atom is rudimentary, and your scientists have not yet determined the clicker of what turns on certain biological steps. The clicker cannot be seen by your equipment or your eyes as of this moment. The clicker is an energetic train. And once it starts, it continues and it moves along a rail. And the rail is a path which is energetically lined through the human body. You have an intense system of these energy rails, and many of your biological trains are sitting quietly, waiting to move. The atom is a type of package for an incredible amount of energy packets of information, and the clicker for the many small activators in the atom are sitting there waiting to be set in motion, to be ignited. And the clicker is the human's awareness. And they go on to talk about our vibratory patterns, which are determined by the movement of our clickers. And these clickers are activations of energy packets. As each atom is being allowed to activate to its full potential, the DNA of your human self is being changed, created, and formed. This is why you can change your DNA. All it takes is the human awareness necessary to activate the clickers. This changes the human vibratory rate. The more the human allows the energetic ignition, the higher the vibratory rate, and the more clickers are activated. What is the result? Changes in your DNA. The DNA that you know of and the DNA you don't know of as yet. This is why you can recreate your body over and over. It is the human awareness, which is the creator of the reality of the human mind, body, and soul. And at this moment in time, as you know it to be, the human awareness is set to such a dramatically low level that the human body is not nearly what it can be. Your brains are not operating in a full capacity, and neither are your hearts, and neither are your minds. For the humans trying to activate the brain, mind, and hearts do not have the easiest of jobs ahead of them, but those humans are intent on amping up their vibratory rate to do so, knowing the difficulties of the human reality presents to them as they change their vibratory rate. I did not write this. This is not the way I talk. I did not know about any of this. This is just what came through. And it's very interesting to talk about the vibratory rate when you're communicating with beings, because the quality of your vibratory rate determines the quality of the beings that you interact with. It goes on Earth. You align with similar frequencies. So that's why it's really important to raise your vibratory rate, to amp up your frequency as high as you can, so that you can align with people who are also of higher frequency, which tend to be more loving. They're not judgmental. They're not jealous. They want to help you. They want to see you succeed. If you're traveling around Earth with a low vibe, you're going to be hanging out with people with a low vibe, and that tends to be more of a difficult life. This is the same thing happens when you're trying to communicate with otherworldly beings. You can attract low frequency entities, and we don't want to do that, because often those low frequency entities, we have decided to call them scary or evil sometimes, but which really isn't always the case. So the vibratory rate is very, very, very important in communicating with other beings, and also for the human being to actualize their potential. I have a YouTube channel, Alien Spirit, and I offer a series of free videos on there telling you how you can raise your vibratory rate. And I also created guided meditations with my voice and music to help you connect with otherworldly beings, whether they're ETs or spirit guides or dead people, because there's a variety of different entities that we can talk with. A year later, in 2020, I became a field investigator for MUFON for North Carolina, and I became a member of the Experiencer Resource Team for MUFON. And I'm now on the executive committee of the Experiencer Resource Team, and we deal only with people who have made direct contact with ETs. There's about 50 or 60 of us around the world, and it's really very fascinating and rewarding work. I help experiencers personally through my website, at planetsev.com, and also through MUFON. I've done over 100 interviews around the world, and I do encourage experiencers to contact me on my website, planetsev.com. I'm featured in an episode of a Canadian TV series, Encounter UFO, on the physical contact episode. And in it with me is Terry Lovelace, Preston Dennett, Alexis Brooks. And I'm also lucky enough to have a butt double in that. So I have my website, planetsev.com, where you can contact me, ET encounters, fill out a couple questions, and then I'll get back to you and I'll help you understand about your ET contact. True ET stories right here. I share some ET stories and drawings that people have sent me. I think it's really important to share so other people can look at it and realize, oh, I've seen that being, and not feel so isolated and feel like they're alone. My YouTube, Alien Spirit TV. This is my Instagram, Sev Tok, and my Facebook, Sev Tok. So it's really easy to find me. I was a master of ceremonies at the MUFON Symposium last year, and this year I'm going to be involved again. This time I'm going to lead an experiencer workshop, and I'm very honored to be asked to do that. And so far this year I'll be speaking at UFOCon in San Francisco, and at the McMenamins UFO Festival. That is in May, and the MUFON Symposium is in August, and there might be some more conferences coming up too. Just on a side note, I have a planet and a star system named after me in the Star Wars galactic system. My best friend Cecilia was dating this guy many years ago who was a writer, and he got a job writing a short story for Star Wars. And he said that he liked my name and he was going to name a planet after me. And I thought he was kidding, but the book came out and I am in the galactic system. I'm even in Wikipedia. And if anybody watches Star Wars Andor, I think that's what it's called. One of the recent episodes actually mentioned my name. This is a graphic that I created because it just reminds me how my thoughts manifest my reality in any given moment, and my interactions with the aliens help me realize this. The aliens taught me how to be present and how to be in control. And they helped me lose the victim vibe, because I really played the victim for most of my life. And that's why I thought the Greys were victimizing me. But when I lost the victim vibe, I realized they weren't victimizing me this whole time. They were helping me. Because before the aliens, I was focused on what was happening outside of me, because I was too afraid to look inside, because I just couldn't face my ET reality. So I had a lot of secrets. And so because of this, for most of my life, I was searching for happiness, which I thought was outside of me. But because of the aliens, I've learned to focus inside of me. And I found what I'm looking for, because now I know that happiness that I was looking for is inside of me. My relationship with the aliens has been a love-hate relationship, which has now turned into a love relationship. And with their guidance and wisdom, I feel like I'm never alone, and that I finally consciously aligned with my reason for being. Thank you for allowing me to share some of my journey with you, and for providing the space to connect with you.